to. Battle of the book jar. Today, we're going to learn to make plutonium from common household items. Hi everyone! 100 bonus points if you can guess where my intro came from. One of my old favorite movies. Yes. Battle of the Book Jar. Oops. So, since this is a new year, I decided to create this as a new series. I had originally last year just played around with it, and I had just been kind of calling it a read it or unhaul it challenge, which I had taken the idea from watching Emily Fox on BookTube here. I'll link her below. And then over the course of the year, it morphed into being my evil book jar Snidely here, who has given me a lot of bad suggestions. However, the problem is that these suggestions inside Snidely are all books that are existing on my shelf. Now, a lot of them are old. A lot of them I bought at a time when I would buy pretty much anything book-wise. So my tastes have changed over the years. So Snidely here is full of all the books that are on my shelves. The blue ones are nonfiction, and everything else is fiction. It originally started out as being color-coded, and then the color coding just went away. But this is all the books on my shelves that are unread, unless they're later books in a series that I'm already reading. So what I'm going to do in this series is I'm going to draw a couple of books from the jar, a nonfiction and a fiction, and I will read them. I'll read the first part of them and see if I want to continue. If I don't continue, I unhaul it. If I do continue, then I can continue and finish the book and decide whether I'm going to keep it or not. Some of the nonfiction in here is actually reference books. So in the case of reference books, I won't necessarily read them, but I'll flip through them and see if I want to keep them. So that's part of why they're in here, is so that it makes me think about what's on my shelves and decide whether I still want it. So that's the general gist of the story. And I hope you enjoy this series. This will be episode 1. So let's get started with episode 1 of the Battle of the Book Jar. It's you and me, Jar. Another year. Mr. Book Jar here, he has a mind of his own, in case you couldn't tell. And often he and I do not see eye to eye. We argue a lot about what books I should read. However, the sad part is that all these books are on my shelf because I bought them. So I do allow myself occasionally to put one back, but I try not to do it real often, because usually if I do, Snidely here decides that he's going to give me an even worse book for my second pick. And so it's kind of like messing with fate, and fate comes in the form of an evil book jar. So let's go ahead and pull a couple of books from here. Okay, let's see. Got to mix it up really good and see what we get. Okay, Snidely, what are you going to give me? Let's pick one. A blue. That's my nonfiction. Let's see what we're looking at for nonfiction. I have, Grassland Settlers. That would be a Canadian history book. So I will go find that and let you know what that one is about. And let's pick a fiction. That's another blue one. Okay. This is a white one. So this might be a kid's book. They used to be kids' books. Let's see. A Question of Loyalty. Now, this was a book that I loved when I was in elementary school, and I found it again after quite a few years. So I do want to read that again and see whether I still like it. It's a historical set in Canada. So I will go find those 2 books and be right back and tell you a little bit more about them. Okay, I found both the books. So let's talk about the nonfiction first. This is A Question of Loyalty by Barbara Greenwood. And like I say, I read this one back when I was in elementary school, and I absolutely loved it. I remember this was one of the books that got me interested in reading historical fiction, which obviously, I now enjoy reading historical fiction quite a lot. So this one takes place in early Canada before it was a country. I think it's in like the 1830s. And it follows a young girl named Deborah. She lives with her family on a farm in what would become Eastern Canada. And one day she goes out to the barn and she finds a young boy named Dan who's wounded there. This is during the time of the rebellion in, I believe it was the 1830s. I'll find out more as I read. But I believe it was the 1830s when there was a rebellion against the British in Canada at that time. And Dan and Deborah are on different sides of the rebellion, but Dan needs help and is begging Deborah to help him. She's caught because if she's found harboring a rebel, then their barn could be burned and their family turned out on the streets. If Dan is caught, he will be hanged. So that's where her dilemma comes in. And it sounds like, I remember it being a really good book. I think it's probably approximately middle grade age range. So, and then the other one is this very exciting Canadian history book. It's called Grassland Settlers, the Swift Current Region During the Era of the Ranching Frontier. So this is from Canadian Plains Studies 4. So I'm curious to see what this one is going to be like. I do enjoy books about the settling of the West and ranching and farming and just in general Western history, Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba history. So we will see how this one reads, if it reads like a textbook or if it reads somewhat more interesting. So I will give those 2 a try and let you know what I think. And this is what I mean when I say you never know what you're going to get off of my shelves. Because I have a lot of very strange books that most people wouldn't pick up. But these ones in particular are a couple that I am interested in checking out, and I will let you know how I feel about them. I finished this one, A Question of Loyalty by Barbara Greenwood. This was a really fun nostalgic read for me because I actually credit this book with probably being one of the first books that really got me interested in historical fiction to begin with. I believe I read this one, it was either in class for grade 7 or 8, or I took it out from the library in grade 7 or 8. But I really enjoyed reading it again. It takes place in 1837 in the part of Canada that eventually became Ontario. And there was a rebellion going on because of the government overtaxing small farmers and causing them to lose their farms. So in this one, you're following Dan, who is a young boy who is fighting for the rebel cause. I think he's like a 14 or 15 kind of thing. And he's fighting for the rebel cause when they march on Toronto and are soundly routed by the militia. He gets injured and escapes with his brother. And they end up getting separated while they're escaping. And he finds himself hiding in a barn in a little town close to the border, where he is found by a young girl named Deborah. Deborah's father and brother are off fighting in the militia. Her father was a lieutenant in the War of 1812 and everything. She feels pity for him, sympathy for him, and decides to help him, even though that goes against what they believe, and could put them in severe danger because the government is chasing down any rebels that escaped. And if you're found harboring a rebel, they'll burn down your house and your barn, and you'll be out on the street. And so it's a very dangerous situation. But Deborah feels that it's right to help him because there's no way he's going to survive otherwise. And from there, it goes on through the story. And I really enjoyed reading this one. Again, I'm going to give it 4 stars. There were little bits of things in the writing that kind of didn't make it a 5-star for me, but I did really enjoy the nostalgic read of this again. So it's definitely staying on my shelves, and I'm giving it 4 stars. Then I did read the first 2 chapters, so 28 pages of this one, Grassland Settlers. And this book, it's a historical look at the settling around the Swift Current region during the ranching period, which was, I believe, from like about the 1870s into like the early 1900s. And it is very readable. The author writes, there's some descriptive parts where he's talking about the land and everything that I actually quite enjoyed reading. But overall, I find one thing with these older history books like this is that they are extremely white-centric. This one in particular, like I read some other ones that didn't really talk about the things that had gone on in the way that, the First Nations people had lost their land and the white settlers had come in and just taken over everything as though it was theirs and all of that. But a lot of, I find that a lot of these older books don't say anything about how wrong that was. It's stuff like this. So with the arrival of white men who hunted, policed, and finally settled in the region, the almost extinct buffalo disappeared entirely from the district. When this happened, it was only a matter of a few years until the local Indians had either died of starvation or quit the area. Like the buffaloes, they left little but their bones to mark their passing. Things like that, where it's just like, it's so dismissive of what happened to the people. And I don't really like that, obviously, because the more we learn about the things that actually went on, the more horrific it is. And these older history books tend to just gloss over that. Like, they're talking about, how the Métis people were starving and weren't able to keep operating their they used to deliver things between the towns using their wagons and everything, and they couldn't do that anymore because of the train coming through and all that. But there's like no nuance of any kind of remorse or anything to the fact that they just destroyed these people's lives. And so I think I am going to DNF this one. It, like I say, it was readable enough, and I'm sure that parts of it I would probably find kind of interesting. But I think that there are probably better books written now about that period where you actually get some of the less white-centric side of things. And so for that, I'm actually going to go ahead and DNF this one and unhaul it. So, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with some of these old history books that I had picked up. A lot of these were ones that I picked up at library book sales and that sort of thing over the years, or like on free tables and things like that. So I've never actually looked through them. There's a few that, I've used for research for various things. But in particular, like some of those ones that I use for research in areas that I'm quite interested in, like the 1930s and that, those I'll keep for reference sake, just because the time period is something that I specifically am using in my writing. But this is a time period and a location that I'm not planning on ever really writing about. I'm interested in reading about the era of the West settlement of the West and all of that, but I would prefer to read about it in a less white-centric format and with a little bit more nuance as to what actually happened to the people who were here before and how their lives were completely changed by this. This one, it just kind of, to me, the parts that I read in the first 2 chapters, it was pretty much, oh, well, the white people were bound to take over, so they did, is the kind of the feeling that I get from it. So I am going to DNF that one, and I'm keeping this one and giving it 4 stars. So we have plenty of time, because that didn't take me very long to read that book. We have plenty of time to see if Snidely is going to give us anything else to read. So I'm going to pick another nonfiction and another fiction, and we'll see what we get. So let's see what Snidely gives us this time. Whoop, I'm dropping one, so let me pick those back up. Let me just push up my sleeve so I don't get it in there, because this sweater is sticky. Okay, let's see what we get now. This is a fiction one. Ooh, boy. Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Okay, I'm going to be reading a classic. I have never read Dickens, so we'll read a classic. And let's see here, a blue one. Those are all green. Blue, we need blue. Here's a blue. We have Classic Aircraft. Okay, I'm going to go see what that one is. That may be a reference book, because I used to collect a lot of books about aircraft back when I wanted to design aircraft for a living back in high school. So I'm going to see what that one is, and I may just keep that one as a reference book or a nostalgia book. But if that's the case, then I'll pick another blue one. So I will go find those, and they are over at my parents' house in the basement. So I will have to go digging through my bins over there, and I will see what I find over there. After a quick run over to my parents' basement, I found the books. So first of all, I have Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. I know nothing about the plot of this, and the back only tells me that it was his second novel, with recognizable antecedents in Gothic romance, the Newgate novel, and popular melodrama. Scathing in its exposure of contemporary cruelties, always exciting, and clothed in an unforgettable atmosphere of mystery and pervasive evil. So that's all it tells me, so I'll have to read a bit before I can tell you the plot of that one, because I've never actually looked up the plot of Oliver Twist. I've never read Dickens before. I have a few of his things, but I've never read them. Then I have this one, Classic Aircraft by Walter J. Boyne. And like I say, this was back in the days when I was really, really into military aircraft and everything, when I wanted to design airplanes and everything. So it goes through various history of aircraft, and then certain actual aircraft in the book as well. So I think I am actually going to at least page through this one and possibly read it, because it does have a good amount of narrative stuff about the planes. And so we'll see whether I end up actually reading through it or just paging through it. And I will let you know what I decide on that one. This one will be kept for nostalgia's sake, just because, like I say, I used to really, really be into aircraft, and I especially liked the older aircraft. So I will give that a little go and see what I think of it. You're helping me again, Raven, are you? Huh? Nobody wants to see your bum on camera. Okay, so anyways, I started and got a little ways into two chapters into Oliver Twist, and so far it's definitely an interesting book, and I'm going to keep reading it. So far I'm finding that there is a bit of a sense of humor in it, which is nice, and I think it's going to be an interesting social commentary. And so far, Dickens is pretty easy to read. So that's my first Dickens. So I'm going to keep reading that one. And then I actually started and read the first chapter in this one too. This is the Classic Aircraft by Walter J. Boyne. And I'm going to keep reading this one as well, because it's kind of a nice little introduction to classic aircraft and flight history and those sorts of things. And it's just kind of a nice, easy read that I think I'm going to kind of enjoy. So I'm going to keep reading that one as well. And I'll let you know when I get a little further in them. I have made some great progress in both of these books. So this one here is the classic aircraft one. I'm actually quite enjoying reading this. I used to read these kind of books all the time, so this is a nostalgia thing for me. But I'm really enjoying it. It's got some really nice visuals in it. These are some of this is a painting, and then it's got lots of really good like actual photographs as well. And I am really enjoying it. It's your basic information, good stories being told in it. And overall, I'm having a lot of fun with that one. So I have a feeling that this one is definitely going to be staying on my shelves. But I'm about half done it now, maybe a little over half. And then last night I made some really good progress in Oliver Twist. I am now on page 168, and it's getting more and more interesting. It took me a while to get into Dickens' writing because obviously it's that Victorian English that you get in so many of those classics. But once I started to get into it now, I'm really enjoying it. I'm caring a lot about little Oliver and wanting some good things to happen to him. So essentially, now that I'm a little further into it, I can kind of tell you what the story is about. So Oliver Twist is a young boy. He is born in a workhouse, and his mother gives birth to him and then dies. So he ends up getting raised in the workhouse, and by the what is it here? It's like the group that, like the church and all of them. And so he gets raised there, and he makes the mistake of asking for a little bit more gruel because they are essentially starving all these children. And one of the other boys tells these little guys that he's going to eat one of them if he doesn't get some more food. So they go through and they end up volunteering Oliver to be the one who asks for more. So that gets him a beating and gets him referred to as a troublemaker. So he is going to be basically sold to be an apprentice to someone. So he ends up as an apprentice to a undertaker. And that only lasts a little while before some bad things happen, and he ends up running away. So he runs away and makes his way to London, and he's only like 10 or 11 years old. And when he gets to London, he runs across these two boys who are thieves, and they take him to a guy named Fagin. Fagin is one of the head thieves. And he stays there and is learning some things, and they're going to use him as a thief. But he's out with the other two boys, and they get caught stealing something. So they take off running, and Oliver doesn't realize what's going on. So he starts running too. And then the other boys disappear, and he's the one who gets caught. So then he ends up getting taken in by this old gentleman named Mr. Brownlow, who helps him cure, like he has a fever and everything. So he helps him and cures him, and is going to be looking after him. But at the same time, you have Fagin and this other one named Bill Sykes, who's another really big bad guy, and these other thieves who are looking for him because they're afraid that he can identify them and will say something that will ruin them. So that's kind of what the general story is so far. And you're following little Oliver and hoping that some good things happen to him. But so far, Dickens' writing is good. He writes in a very sarcastic manner, which I wasn't really expecting, but he's very sarcastic. Like when he's talking about the events near the beginning, and he's just so sarcastic about the conditions that these kids found themselves in, and what these people who were running the workhouses were like and everything. Very, very sarcastic. Uh, there is a little bit of racism, obviously, which is typical of that time period. And yeah, but overall, like the story itself is quite interesting. So I'm definitely going to keep reading that one and see what I think of it. I sometimes have a bit of a hard time with classics just because they tend to be very, very slow moving with the writing style and everything. But I am starting to now get into this. It took me quite a while. It took me about 100 pages to really start to get the feel of it. So I'm going to keep reading that, and I will let you know what I think when I'm done. Hi, everyone. It's been a while, but I finished Oliver Twist the other night. So this was actually my first Dickens. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I actually didn't mind his writing style at all. He has a very sarcastic sense of humor that really played well for the story because it is a very, very bleak world that he's writing about. And the sarcastic tone of voice that he used really kind of made it a little bit more palatable to even read about that period without feeling like you were just depressed. Because it painted a very bleak world for poor people in Victorian era. And I definitely can tell you I would not want to have lived in that time period. I am red, aren't I? I got some sun yesterday. It was actually warm out, so I actually got some sun yesterday. So this is just kind of a little example of some of the way he uses the very sarcastic tone to kind of bring light onto what life was like. So this is the Mr. Bumble, who is the beadle who looks after the workhouse and everything. So he's like I can't remember what exactly a beadle was, but it was like they looked after like the running of certain things. And he was a parochial beadle, so he was like from the church or something like that anyways. But he's talking about how the paupers aren't contented with what they give them. And he says, "Why, here's one man that in consideration of his wife and large family has a quartern loaf and a good pound of cheese, full weight. Is he grateful, ma'am? Is he grateful? Not a copper farthing's worth. What does he do, ma'am, but ask for a few coals? If it's only a pocket handkerchief full, he says. Coals. What would he do with coals? Toast his cheese with them and then come back for more. That's the way with these people, ma'am. Give them an apron full of coals today and they'll come back for another the day after tomorrow, as brazen as alabaster." Like, it's just things like that. And then there was this next page. He's still going on and on about the paupers and everything. And this one guy, he says, "Very good," says our overseer, taking him away again. That's food that the guy had asked for more. "You won't get anything else here." "Then I'll die in the streets," says the vagrant. "Oh, no, you won't," says our overseer. And then the woman that he's talking to, the matron of the workhouse, says, "Ha ha, that was very good. So like Mr. Granite, wasn't it?" interposed the matron. "Well, Mr. Bumble?" "Well, ma'am," rejoined the beadle, "he went away, and he did die in the streets. There's an obstinate pauper for you." Like... So yeah, he uses that very sarcastic tone, and he like he'll talk about how these people in charge of the workhouse are such good people because, you know, they have this very high on themselves sort of attitude and everything. But the general story was actually really fun to read. It was a very good story. I liked the ending. He did paint a very bleak view of life in Victorian England as a poor person. And I liked some of the characters. There was definitely racism, so be aware of that, which I find with a lot of these older classics set in that sort of time period. From that time period, there does tend to be a fair bit of racism in them. So, but overall, the story itself was not bad. So I gave that one 4 stars, and that was my first Dickens, and I would definitely like to read more because I've heard that this one isn't his best. People say that A Tale of Two Cities is better. So, but that was my first Dickens. So this one will be going back on the shelf in the Battle of the Book Jar. So we had a fairly good little period here. This is what we ended up going through from the book jar, Mr. Snidely here. He gave us some books to read, and these were the ones that we ended up with. So I'll just go through them with you. So we started out with A Question of Loyalty by Barbara Greenwood. This was a nostalgic read for me. I did give it 4 stars. It probably doesn't deserve 4 stars, but it was the nostalgia that did it for me. There were some issues in it that, as a adult reader, I see some of the character flaws and things like that I didn't when I was younger. But I did read this when I was like 12 or 13 originally, so it has a lot of nostalgia for me. So that one's going back on my shelf for nostalgia. Then I attempted to read this nonfiction book, Grassland Settlers, the Swift Current Region during the Era of the Ranching Frontier. And this was a DNF, and it's going to be an unhaul because it was way, 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 way too white-centric. And I find that with a lot of these older history books like this, like I have a lot of them that I picked up at used bookstores. So going through them like this is good because I can get kind of get a feel for whether they're decent or not. And this one here, I read a couple of chapters and it was very, very white-centric, very dismissive of what the white settlement did to the First Nations people and everything. So that's an unhaul. And then, of course, I read Oliver Twist and gave that 4 stars, and that's going to go back on the shelf in my classics area. And then I read this one here, Classic Aircraft by Walter J. Boyne, which was one of those old, coffee table books that I used to collect about aircraft. And this, again, was a very nostalgic read for me. I gave it 3 stars because there was nothing super special about it. But it was, again, just very nostalgic. And I did enjoy the information in it. It went through various classic aircraft from the past, a lot of it from World War I and II and that kind of thing. And it was an entertaining read. I gave it 3 stars, and it will be going back on my shelf with my aircraft books that I collected when I was in high school because I used to absolutely love aircraft. I wanted to be a pilot at one point, but I get airsick, so that kind of put the kibosh on that. So, but yes, so that one's going to go back on the shelf as well. So we have 1 unhaul and 3 to go back on the shelves, and we will pick more books from the jar in our next episode of the Battle of the Book Jar, where I fight with Snidely. Anyways, little dramatic. So I will see you guys soon on my next video. Make sure you give me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you guys soon. I've got lots of videos coming up here that I've been working on. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I will probably be starting another version of this one in, let's see now, it's the end of March now. So I will probably do another one in April. I have quite a few books here that I'm still trying to get read in March. So I won't be actually selecting the new books until sometime in April. But I will see you guys soon. Bye.